The old car bounced along the dusty road, its suspension creaking with every bump and dip. Josh gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white from the tension. His three friends, Emma, Ben, and Chloe, dozed in the back, their heads bobbing with the car's movement. They were on a road trip, driving to a music festival, but they were lost, hopelessly lost, with no clear sense of direction. They had been driving for hours, the endless road stretching out before them with no end in sight. The sun was sinking lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the barren landscape.
I told you we should have stayed on the main road. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, Josh. My phone hasn't had a signal in like an hour. We're completely off the grid.
Josh sighed deeply, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He knew they were lost, but he didn't want to admit it. The map offered no clues. He wanted to appear brave, confident, like he had everything under control. But the truth was, he was starting to get scared. The uncertainty gnawed at him. The road was getting darker, the twilight giving way to an eerie dusk. The trees on either side seemed to press in closer, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out the remaining light. Just when their hope was fading, Josh spotted something in the distance. A glimmer of light. Lights. A town. It was like a beacon in the darkness. He felt a surge of relief wash over him, a glimmer of hope. They could stop, ask for directions, maybe even find a place to stay for the night. It was a chance to regroup. As they drew closer, the name of the town came into view on a weathered sign. Silent Hollow. It sounded ominous, but it was their only option. Silent Hollow. The name sent a shiver down Josh's spine, but he pushed the feeling aside. Right now, he was just grateful to find any sign of civilization. As they entered the town, however, a strange feeling washed over them. The town was eerily quiet. The streets were deserted. Houses stood dark and empty. There were no cars, no people, no signs of life at all. It was like stepping into a ghost town.
Hello.
Josh called out, his voice echoing strangely in the silence, but there was no answer. Only the sound of the wind whistling through the empty streets.
This is creepy. Let's just get out of here.
Josh hesitated. He knew they needed gas, and it was getting late. He didn't want to be driving around these deserted roads after dark.
Let's just look around quickly. See if we can find a gas station or something.
They drove slowly through the town, their headlights cutting through the growing darkness. The silence was unnerving, almost as if the town itself was holding its breath. The only sound was the low hum of the engine and the rustling of leaves in the wind. It was a sound that seemed to echo through the empty streets, amplifying the eerie stillness. The houses were old and dilapidated, their once vibrant facades now faded and crumbling. Paint peeled from their walls and windows were boarded up, as if the town had been abandoned in a hurry. It was like time had stood still in Silent Hollow, a place where the past lingered in every shadow.
This place gives me the creeps. It's like the town is watching us. It's like one of those ghost towns you see in movies, but somehow it feels even more real and unsettling.
Don't say that. We need to stay calm.
Emma shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. But even as she spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every shadow seemed to hide a pair of eyes. Unseen eyes followed their every move, making the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end, a primal response to the unseen danger. They reached what looked like the town square, a place that might have once been bustling with life. An old, rusted water fountain stood in the center, its basin filled with dead leaves, a testament to the passage of time. A faded sign creaked in the wind, barely visible in the gathering gloom. Its message, a ghostly whisper of the past. It read, "Welcome to Silent Hollow, population." The rest of the sign was broken off, leaving an unsettling mystery. The silence was starting to get to Josh. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest.
Okay, let's split up. We'll cover more ground that way.
It wasn't the smartest idea, he knew, but he was desperate to find help, or at least some answers. And the sooner they found what they were looking for, the sooner they could get out of this creepy town.
Are you sure that's a good idea? It's getting dark.
It's fine. We'll stick together. Just call out if you find anything, or if you see anyone.
He knew it was a long shot. There was clearly no one around. But he had to try something. With a shared look of apprehension, they each chose a direction and headed off into the deepening twilight. Josh's heart pounded in his chest as he walked down the deserted street. The houses loomed on either side, dark and silent. He tried to focus on his surroundings, looking for any sign of life, any indication that someone, anyone, lived in this forsaken town.
As I rounded a corner, I noticed something strange. A light. It was faint, but definitely there, flickering behind the curtains of a small, ramshackle house. Hope surged through me. Finally, a sign of life.
He hurried towards the house, his footsteps echoing on the empty street. As he drew closer, he noticed something even stranger. The front door was slightly ajar. A warm, inviting light spilled out onto the porch.
Hesitantly, I reached out and knocked on the door. Hello? Is anyone home?
Silence. But the light still flickered inside, beckoning him closer. Taking a deep breath, Josh pushed the door open and stepped inside. The house was small and cluttered, filled with dusty furniture and old-fashioned appliances. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay, but despite the eerie stillness, there was a strange sense of warmth about the place, as if someone had just been there.
I noticed a fire crackling in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. And on a small table in the center of the room, I saw something that made me catch my breath. A place setting. A single plate, a knife and fork, a glass of water. And on the plate, a steaming bowl of soup. It was as if someone was expecting me.
He walked slowly towards the table, his eyes darting around the room, searching for any sign of the person who had prepared this meal. But the house was empty. He was completely alone. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, its mournful cry sending shivers down Josh's spine. The night was dark and full of shadows, each one seeming to hide a secret. He stood frozen in the center of the room, his heart pounding in his chest. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the old house. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, terribly wrong. It was as if the very air was charged with a sense of impending doom.
I called out to my friends, my voice echoing eerily in the silence. The sounds seemed to be swallowed by the darkness, leaving me feeling even more isolated. But there was no answer. The room remained as silent as a tomb, the shadows dancing mockingly around me. Just the mournful cry of the wind and the crackling of the fire. The flames flickered, casting eerie shadows on the surrounding trees.
He tried to ignore the growing sense of dread that was creeping up his spine. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his feet felt like they were glued to the floor. He told himself it was just his imagination, that there was a perfectly logical explanation for all of this. Maybe it was just the wind playing tricks on him, but deep down he knew something was wrong. The feeling of being watched was too intense to ignore. He could feel it in his bones. The air was thick with tension, and every shadow seemed to move with a life of its own.
As I turned to leave, I thought I heard a whisper, soft and indistinct, coming from the shadows in the corner of the room. It was barely audible, but it sent chills down my spine. I spun around, my heart racing. "Who's there?" I demanded. My voice sounded small and frightened in the vast emptiness.
But there was no answer. The room remained silent, the shadows unmoving, only the whispering wind and the ever-present feeling that he was not alone. The night seemed to close in around him, the darkness pressing in from all sides. Panic welled up inside of Josh. He had to get out of there. He had to find his friends. He stumbled back out of the house and into the growing darkness. The streetlights flickered erratically, casting long, distorted shadows that danced and twisted in the wind. He ran through the deserted streets, his breath catching in his throat. But no matter which way he turned, he couldn't find his way out. It was like the town was playing tricks on him, leading him further and further astray.
He called out for his friends again, his voice hoarse with fear. But the only answer was the echo of his own voice, bouncing back at him from the empty buildings. He was trapped. Trapped in this town with its whispering shadows and its eerie silence.
Josh finally stumbled back into the town square, his chest heaving, his mind racing. The old fountain stood in the center, its water long since dried up, a silent testament to the town's demise. And then he saw them, or rather he didn't see them. Emma, Ben, and Chloe were gone. They had vanished without a trace. He whirled around, searching frantically for any sign of his friends.
He called out their names again and again, his voice raw with fear and desperation. But there was no answer. Only the sound of his own ragged breathing and the pounding of his heart in his ears. They were gone. Just like everyone else who had ever set foot in this godforsaken town.
Driven to the brink by fear and desperation, Josh stumbled towards the only building with any light remaining, the town library. The door creaked open as if inviting him in. The musty smell of old books and decaying paper filled the air. He flipped on a light switch, but nothing happened. The only illumination came from a single window where moonlight spilled onto the dusty floor. He made his way towards a table with a single book lying open, its pages yellowed with age. It was a history book about Silent Hollow. With trembling hands, he began to read.
The town had a dark secret, a terrifying history. It had been founded by a group of people who believed they could cheat death. They had made a pact with a malevolent entity, offering their souls in exchange for eternal life. But the entity had tricked them. It had cursed the town, trapping their souls within its boundaries, forever bound to Silent Hollow.